Good morning, welcome to Mobility Magic on a Monday with me, Simon Page. Welcome, if you're joining us for the first time, if you're joining us for your regular Mobility Magic session that you join us for every week, great to see you. Today we are working on a little bit of hip and knee, so we'll be working through kind of posterior, anterior, stretching a little bit at both sides, just getting a little bit of balance, and we'll do some local stuff with the knee as well. So things you need for today: lacrosse ball as usual. Might also need a towel, some pillows maybe. I have a chair and a bench, but a chair is just fine. We'll do some stuff on those and also the floor as well. So just kind of a bit of a hodgepodge of different things, but hopefully should help address some issues with your knees, with your low back, with your hips, and you should feel way better afterwards. So apologies about last week's technology issues. I know that the session wasn't posted up online, but again, hopefully this week, problem solved. So, nice to see everyone joining us. As I say, I'm going to turn the comments off because I get really distracted. Nice to see you too, Dan. And we're going to get on with the session. So, just going to turn those comments off. Awesome. So, we're just going to do our check-in as we do always, because we're working on the areas of the knees and the hip. We want to make sure that we have a feedback loop just to see how it feels after the session. So we know that what we've done has mattered and it works for us. So first thing I would suggest you do is kind of see how your knees feel, bend them a little bit. I'd also do a rotation of the hips, so you can do this by just internally and externally rotating the foot, just keeping the foot planted into the floor, hopefully you can see it, and just rotating. You can also lift your foot and just do some opening and closing the gates just to kind of see. So if any of those areas feel a little bit crunchy, don't feel very loose, then this is going to be for you. Okay, so let's start with the first thing we're going to do. We're going to start with the ball on the floor, the cross ball. Now you can do this with a foam roller, you can do this with any kind of ball that you have, or alternatively, as I sometimes suggest, you can also do this with a plastic bottle with the lid screwed on, because the little bit of give in the bottle often works great for feet too. So, starting at the base of the big toe, let's just roll a little bit to start, just kind of find any kinks. The feet are a great place to start for this, because often the translation of tension through the foot can work its way up into our knees, into posterior towards our glutes, so hamstrings, calves, and through the anterior chain as well, so into the quads. So let's just start there, shall we? So moving into the middle of the foot, I'm now below the middle toes, and I'm going to apply a slightly different technique to this area. I'm going to bring my toes all the way up, I'm going to bring them all the way down. We're trying to scrunch our toes, we're trying to extend our toes, and we're just pulling in. So we're just creating a little bit of applied pressure. About, if you would say out of 10, it'd probably be like an 8 out of 10 in terms of pressure. You don't want any pain, and I would also suggest take some nice deep breaths as well. Just working that ball across to the base of the little toe now. We're just working back, and we're just getting a little bit of a roll now. So as you start to feel that tension loosen up on the foot, you can apply a little bit more pressure, and you can also roll just a little bit, just getting the ball to roll with more pressure from the front to the back of the foot. Okay, now let's change feet. We're using the same technique. Again, if you've done this before, feel free to blast ahead to the areas that you know you have tension, because I'm covering this for anyone that's tuning for the first time. Again, start with the feet, really important. You can get this done before sessions sometimes, because you don't always cover at the start. But let's start at the base of our big toe. We're just going to roll forward slightly with a little bit down pressure. 8 out of 10. For those that are just joining us, we're just starting out with a normal lacrosse ball, roll the foot. And we're going to be working on some knees and low back. Some knees and some hips and low back. So we are just rolling the foot forward across the ball, 8 out of 10 intense pressure. Now if you find any spots that feel a little bit more tension than others, you can spend some more time. This is something that you probably want to do a few times a day, especially if you wear any footwear which affects your body. So base of the middle toes this time, we're bringing our toes all the way up to the ceiling, we're pushing all the way down to the floor, all the way up to the ceiling, all the way down to the floor. And now we're at the base of the little toes, and we're just going to start to roll in towards the middle. So you can use any of the techniques, they all work, they're all valid, it depends on how your foot feels in these exercises. You can even spend some time at the heel of the foot too. We're going to leave it right there for now just so we can get through all the material. We will bring this back later on, but for the second thing we're going to do, we are going to do a little bit of a calf stretch. So those who have done this before, sometimes it's better where you wear shoes because you get a little bit more traction. You can also do this with a lacrosse ball. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But for now, all we're going to do is we're going to come up to the wall. Hopefully you can see me still on the screen. I have my foot against the wall, but it's at a slight angle. So we're going to place two hands against the wall. It's just for stability. And I'm just leaning in towards the wall, using my back foot to assist the stretch. Again, a little bit easier if you have footwear because you get a little bit more traction. But for this particular exercise, we're keeping our front leg straight, our front foot bent at an angle, with our toes against the wall, and you should feel a light stretch on the calf. If you want to add some intensity to it, you can push your foot into the wall. So let's just push our foot into the wall, and then we can fall a little bit more into the stretch. Now, if you find that that isn't enough of an angle for you, I'm going to give you an adaptation in a second. We're moving on to the right foot this time. I have my foot slightly bent against the wall. I have my leg straight all the way up to the hip, and I'm placing my two hands on the wall, leaning it in to get the stretch. I can spend as little or as long as I want on this one. And if I want to add a little bit more of a stretch, I'm going to push my foot into the wall. I'm going to push my toes into that wall, and I'm going to lean in. So I'm getting a little bit of activation, I'm getting some inhibition of the muscle, so therefore aid the stretch. So the other way you can do this, if we come back to our lacrosse ball, there's another way we can do it. Also works great if you have a slightly flatter surface or a step or a yoga brick. But all we can do is bring our foot in front, try our best to stay on top of the ball. We're going to bring our foot in front, and we're just going to lean slightly into it, and even work up a little bit more, and we're just getting a little bit more of a calf stretch combined with some plantar fascia stretching as well, so some release in that area. So you do it quickly on the other side. This is just a second option. You don't have to do it this way, but it's just going to give you a little bit more of a stretch if you have the range. Okay, so next thing we're going to do, we're going to take our ball. So we have a ball again. Just grab a seat for a second. You do this on the floor. You can do this on a normal seat. But we are going to place the ball behind our knee. So if you have any contraindications, anything the doctor has told you not to do with the knee, like a knee replacement or so on, this might not be for you, but this one's really good for just creating space within the joint. So taking my ball and placing it behind my knee. 3 positions we can be in. We want to be behind the joint though, and it's going to sandwich our calf and our hamstring together. So you can just about see the ball in the front there. And I'm just bringing that leg towards me. So a couple of things are going to happen here. First thing is we're going to create a little bit of space in the joint. We're also releasing the calf just a little bit, and we're creating some release in the hamstring too. So just making sure that that ball is as high as it can be up inside the joint right here. And we're creating a little bit of pressure. Again, about a 7 or an 8 out of 10 in terms of pressure. And I'm just squeezing slightly just to create a release. Now, this can take a few minutes, so you want to give it a little bit of time. For the sake of today, if you're watching this on replay, give it a pause and just let your body relax. Let that calf and hamstring release. If you're watching it live, just be aware that this could take a little bit longer, this one, but it feels really good. Now, if you want to take this up a step, there is a way that you can do this, adding a little bit of body weight into, and I'll cover that at the end. But for now, we're just going to change position to the middle position. So now I'm bang in the middle of the joint. I have some more pressure on the gastroc, a little bit on the soleus too, and I have the middle hamstring too. So that biceps femoris is kind of under pressure. And I can squeeze, so I could, in theory, contract that hamstring if I want to add a little bit more tension. I could contract the calf if I wanted to add a little bit more tension. And the last one, again, I'll show you at the end. So this time we're going to move to the outside, so now you can't quite see it, so I'm going to turn around. And now I'm on the outside. So this one's a little bit harder to kind of hold, which is why you might want to just put your fingers there to hold it. But again, this can take a few minutes, so if you get the chance to do this one, you might want to spend a little bit more time on it outside the session, because it does take a little while to work, but very effective even in the short term, just creating some space in your knee. So I'm just holding the ball in slightly because it has a tendency to pop out. Applying the same thing, so I can contract my hamstring, I can contract my calf, some of the gastrosoleus, and this time we're going to relax. Now you can also do this with a towel rolled up, that's also effective, but the adaptation that you can use for this one if you want to apply a little bit more pressure is we're going to come into a kind of tall kneeling position. We're going to put the ball behind the calf and we can lean back into it. So you can probably see there, I'm just leaning my weight backwards. This one works very, very effectively as kind of the next step with the exercise. But you want to apply a little bit less pressure at first, and then once you kind of get comfortable, once your body embraces the release, then you can come back a little bit more. So for the second side, I'm going to show you with a towel, just so you can kind of see what I mean. I have a towel prepared. Just roll it up, just going to pop it behind your knee. This can be a little bit more effective because you can get all of the areas done at once, and you can even apply a little bit more pressure. So again, just behind the joint, I want it as high as I can be. I'm bringing my leg as close as I can. I'm just applying a little bit of pressure, and I can even engage the hamstring. So I'm just contracting it, trying to get my heel towards my butt, and I'm lifting my toe a little bit, and then I can also push down to get a little bit of activation, and then I can pull up and push down. You can do a variation of all those things. Works really fantastically well. As you get a bit more of a release, you're going to want to pull your foot in towards you a little bit more. Harder to do with the lacrosse ball because of its size, a little bit easier to do with the towel, and the towel is also a really good beginner's variation as well. So if you're finding this one a little bit tough, come back and try the towel, and you can even do it in that tall kneeling position where we're just adding some weight into that stretch. So you can see the towel right there. I'm just leaning back into it, letting some pressure, and just creating some space within that joint. So coming down to the bench now, you can probably see that I have a bench set up behind me. If you have a chair, that works equally as well, but you may want some sort of cushion for this one, or pillow, because we're going to do a couch stretch next. So if you've done this stretch before, you'll know that this can get a little bit intense on the hips quite quickly. So we are going to spend a few minutes on this one. I'm going to show you a few variations of how to get into this stretch. Okay? So we're going to place our leg on the bench like we're going to do a split squat, lunge type position. We're going to lower ourselves down to the floor. So from the side, I have my foot, I'm just putting it up on the bench, I'm walking around. Okay? Now, if this gets too intense for you, if you feel a lot of discomfort in the knee, I would start with step one, which was the knee release, a little bit of calf. Maybe avoid this stretch for now, but watch on the replay and reintroduce it at a later stage. And we're going to get a little bit of tension through the hip. So this is a great catch-all stretch if you have any tension in the low back, in the hip, in the knee, in the quad. This can be a real lifesaver. And it also works the lateral sling as well, which I'll show you an adaptation for in a second. So just going to shift our weight forward, keeping our chest nice and tall. Imagine there's a piece of string through your head, just pulling you nice and tall, and the chest nice and proud. And we're just going to lean forward slightly, and you should feel the tension start to build on the front of the quad. So once you get to this stage, that's about where you want to be. You want to feel an 8 out of 10 in terms of stretch awareness, and hopefully no pain. You want to feel as little tension and discomfort as possible. And so once you're in this position, there's a couple of things we can do. We can either contract our foot into the bench, and you should feel your quad activate on the front, and then you should be able to relax and lean back slightly to get deeper into the stretch. Or you can also add a little bit of a turn into the stretch, and you can support yourself by adding tension to the outside leg, and you can add a twist and a lean. So now I'm stretching this side of my body as well. And I can do a combination of the two things. So I'm contracting my foot into the bench, and then leaning back as I relax that muscle. I'm lifting my arm up, I'm turning and leaning to the side. So we'll do this a little bit more slowly now that you know the moves that are coming up. I'm going to take some nice deep breaths in. So first of all, nice inhalation. I'm contracting into the bench, so I'm starting to shift my weight forward, and then I'm relaxing, breathing out and leaning back, taking a nice deep breath in, breathing out as I lean to the side. And if you have the stability, you can even remove this hand and just shift to the side. And then just explore the angles. If you need to bring your arm forward and back, you can really feel it start to release on this one side. So we're going to take a break on the left side and switch over to the right. We'll come back to the left in a bit. So bring your weight forward, bring this other leg forward into this lunge position with our back foot on the bench. So just so you can see it from the side, those of you who are just tuning in, I have my leg on the bench behind me, it's slightly bent. If you have any issues with knees, if you have any contraindications, anything your doctor said not to do, this may not be one, but if it is, skip ahead, we're going to do some hamstring stuff as well. So again, great catch-all exercise. A pillow or a yoga mat or something underneath the knee is always useful. We are going to feel the tension on the quad, a little bit in the hip flexor too. We are just leaning our weight forward into this front leg, getting a little bit of a stretch, just kind of finding out where we are. So with this one, again, first modification we're going to make is we're going to push into the bench. We're contracting this quad, should shift your hip forward, and then we're just going to lean back into that new range. So you might just find that suddenly you gain all this new range, and we're just going to sit in that position. Feel that stretch on the front. We're going to bring our hip forward, so you also want to make sure that your hip's level, and then we're just going to lean our body weight to the side. So you can have your hand on the inside, we're leaning to the side, let's stretch up, and then we come back to the center. Now, can we combine the two like we did it on the other side? So we're pushing our foot into this bench, or chair, or couch, if that's where you're at, because you can also use the couch. It's called a couch stretch after all. And now we're just relaxing and leaning back. We're bringing this hand all the way nice and tall, and we're leaning to the side. You can have your hand on the inside of your leg to provide some stability, or if you're not stable already, you can add a little bit of turn too, and you can combine all three. So, first modification, we are pushing into this bench, and as we relax that leg, we're coming back into the stretch and staying nice and tall. The second one is going to be our lean across, and then our third one is going to be a combination of the two. So let's switch back to the left leg. And if you're any more graceful than me, you get bonus points. And we're just going to push into the bench. We're going to stretch up nice and tall. We're going to add a turn in this time, looking up at our hand. We're going to lean across. And we're going to take a nice deep breath in that position, okay? You should feel your lateral component of your body, so anything from the hip upwards, so TFL, intercostals, into your serratus, all of that good stuff, even a little bit into your QL, so that area where everyone kind of gets a little bit tacked down and tight. And we're just going to lean forward into that front foot again, and we're going to try and lean back as far as we can. So once we get into that stretch, this time we're just going to bring our chin back, so now we're leaning back a little bit over our knee, and we're just holding that stretch, and then we're just coming forward slightly. Okay, so second time we're going to come into this nice tall stretch, nice deep breath in, we're stretching all the way up, we're looking at that hand, leaning all the way over, shifting our weight, and then we just bring our chest nice and tall, tucking our chin, and leaning back. Awesome. Coming down again, last time you're going to switch. Bring this leg forward. If you want to take this up one more level, you can do this against the wall. If you're particularly flexible, I am not that flexible, this would be a modification for me. If you want to take this back a level, you can do this from the floor and build up. So anything that's kind of from yay high to level works. Stack a couple of pillows, maybe some sort of riser, that works really well. Any stretch that you can get will obviously help to ease those hips and knees. So, second time we're going to go through, it's the last time I should say on this side, and we're just going to bring our hips forward slightly, pushing into the bench, so hopefully you can see my foot is on the bench. I'm now pushing in, and I'm going to come into that nice tall position. If you need support, hands on the inside of your leg. If you don't, we're looking up the hand, we're shifting our weight to the right, and then we're relaxing, we're leaning into that side, and we're relaxing, coming back to the start position. Chest is nice and tall. As we shift our chin backwards, we're getting a nice stretch through the front line, into the quad, through the knee, and the hip. So, last time, last stretch, okay? We're gonna stay nice and tall, hands on the inside of the leg if you need it, or on top. We're stretching up, leaning back, feeling all of this side open up, and we're coming down, packing our chin, chest nice and tall, leaning back. Excellent. So, let's come to a standing position. Let's see how those hips, those knees already feel after doing those exercises right there, that deep stretch. And let's see if we can add in an extra layer here. So, I also have a chair, just so I don't have my back towards you, so I'm just going to set that quick. And we're just going to do a bit of rotation and a hamstring stretch on the chair. So, we want to keep it as dynamic as we can. We want to make sure that the fluid in the hip is exchanging. So, we want to keep this as full range as possible with rotations, which we'll do in a second. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to revisit hamstring stretch. So, with this one, if you remember, we're not just trying to reach for our toe. We're going to shift our hip. So I have a chair because I don't want to face away from you, but use whichever medium works, couch, chair, bench, whatever. And we're shifting our hip away to start the stretch. So I'm just leaning slightly forward, but then pulling my hip away. That should catch the proximal end of the hamstring. And now pull your toes towards you. So those two things alone for most people will be enough. You start to get a stretch, and now we start to lean our body forward, getting a little bit of weight towards our toe. Now, if you are extra flexible, this is where you can add the reach. I'm not particularly one of those people. So what I can do to start building range is take a nice deep breath in. And as I breathe out, I'm going to let my body fall into a new range. So again, start with a position where you're at 7 or 8 out of 10 in terms of stretch awareness. And as I breathe out, I can help my body to fall into that new range. Accept that new range and getting nice and deep. And that's enough for that side. So whilst we're here, we're going to do a rotation. We're going to work into that hip rotation. So you will have done this before. We've done our kind of goalie floor-based stretch routine. I think we covered the last week or the week before. We can also aid in assisting that hip to rotate. So the aim with this one is we're keeping our left foot, my left foot forward, and I'm keeping this foot, the one that's rotating, trying to keep my hips from moving too much. So I don't want to like turn all the way around, but I do want a little bit of a turn in my hip, enough to get some internal and external rotation. Imagine it's like a windscreen wiper on a car. That's kind of what we're going for here. We're going to external, so external towards the back wall, internal towards you. You might even feel some clicks and pops because we kind of loosened a few things up when we did that hip flexor stretch. So we're just turning in, getting some pressure. Now, once you take this up a level, you can dig your foot into that chair, to whatever your foot is on, and we can turn. If you're feeling discomfort, I would probably just back it off just a little bit, okay? Don't want any pain or discomfort. And from the standing position here, just push down. So now we're getting an isometric contraction. We're going to add that stability back in because we're pulling it in. So we're doing like an adduction into the midline. We're doing an isometric. We're turning back round, and we're turning again. Hips are facing forward this time. I'm adducting. I'm squeezing my hips together, adding a little bit of stability this way. Okay, I'm going to turn the chair around to the other side so you can see. I would say give me a thumbs up if you can still see it, but no chat. Foot is up on the chair, and depending upon which side is the side that you feel the tightest, you may want to spend a little bit longer on this. So again, to initiate the first stretch, which is our hamstring stretch, we're going to plant our foot on the surface. We are shifting our hips back, so we want to make sure they're square right now with the chair. And the first thing we're going to do is pull our toe towards, or sorry, the last thing we're going to do is pull our toe towards us. So hips come back, toe comes up. This should be enough to engage a hamstring stretch. You could even feel it a little bit in the calf as you engage that foot. And if you want to add a little bit more of a stretch, we're going to either reach for the foot from this position, keeping our back nice and flat, or we're going to take a nice deep breath in. And as we breathe out, we're just falling into that range. Nice deep breath in. Pushing our hips back. Again, you want to try and keep that back as flat as you can. We're trying to shift our weight from the hips. After all, that's where the hamstring attaches between the knee and the hip. And we want to make sure that we're not trying to compensate through the body. So any rounding this way is probably not going to help you. We want to make sure we just focus on that hamstring, okay? So second stretch. This is the rotation of the hip. This is where we're just working on that joint, just trying to add a little bit more kind of synovial fluid exchange. So we're going to turn our foot to face you. We're going to turn my foot to face you. I'm going to push my foot into the chair. I'm going to turn my hip towards you. And I'm going to try and do a bit of a windscreen wiper motion as we turn in and out. In. So in this way. And external. So internal rotation. External rotation is something we tend to lose as we get older. If we sit more, it's something that I've had to actively work on. Been doing a lot more sitting since the whole of COVID has started, but we're regaining it, and that's important because this is a good predictor of whether you're going to have any ill health benefits of your hips, low back. If you have good internal external rotation, this can really help you. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to work on a little bit of isometric work just to reinforce that range. We always like to do that at the end. So you've done a few passes, we're now into the isometric. So we're going to squeeze our feet together. We're adducting or adducting the legs. So creating an isometric. You should feel it in the middle of your hips as we push them together. We're squeezing. We're just going to return to the start position. We're turning, staying nice and tall. Squeeze, 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 squeezing together. Relax, turn the foot. We're squeezing together, and then we're relaxing. So let's just lose that chair. We're just going to do one more variation of this hip rotation. So one that I like, one that I see other people use, and I think this is a really, really great way of just getting into adding some movement into the stretch, is we're going to plant our right foot on this occasion, and we're just turning our left foot in. So we're coming from a standing position. We're just keeping this back leg planted. We're turning, and then we're back. So we're actually rotating this hip, but we're keeping it planted. Moving our whole body around. So if you have any discomfort as you actually move this hip, this is a really great way of working around that issue. We're planting this foot. We're stepping around the foot, so we can come in, we can work the angles. I'm stepping wide this time. I can step out and around. I'm twisting around the ankle. And again, if you have any knee issues stability-wise, this may not be the best one, but if you feel it very locally to the hip, this can be really good. So I'm just going to come more towards you so I can get fully round, but we can come all the way back, all the way out and around. We're going to move to the other side, okay? So the idea with that one is we're working the actual joint itself, moving around it. Plant that front foot. We're going to work out to the side, we're working around the clock. We're planting that foot, around and in and around. It can be a little bit easier if you have shoes on because you get a little bit more traction. We're just turning that hip, getting a little bit more rotation in the socket by keeping that hip planted. Coming out to the side and around, just getting that hip to open up. So again, exercise today, knee and your hamstring, a little bit of quad tension, hip flexors should help your low back too. A little bit of isometric work at the end just to kind of reinforce the range. Now let's do a check-in. How do your knees feel? Do they feel a little bit better? A little bit less tension than they did before? How's that low back? How's that low back feel? Hopefully a little bit better than it did. And if there's any other areas that you would like us to cover in next week's session, feel free to write a message below the video to let us know what you'd like us to cover. Switch the comments on quickly. Hopefully you enjoyed that session. A little bit of low back, as I say, a little bit of knee work, a little bit of hip flex and quads. And hopefully there's some new techniques for you to use that will help you with your mobility sessions. So again, next week, 11:30, hopefully I will see you then. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. Great lineup again this week for the Good Life team. And again, if you have any suggestions, anything you'd like us to cover, please write it in the video that we post afterwards. Hopefully technology will be on my side this week and it should post properly. And thanks so much. I'll see you next week.